So how's everybody doing today? I mean, I'm not going to sit up here and like PowerPoint you to death. I got one deck, that's it, and it's real simple. You know, the transition period from when I got out of the military was very challenging. I was like most veterans, wounded warriors, kind of, you know, adamant about this whole thing. You know, my whole language changed, organizational culture was different, and I just really didn't understand, you know, what it took to really, you know, segue over into a position. I didn't know what a resume was. I mean, it's everything from that. But anyway, I figured it out, and I wanted to pursue all the brothers and sisters that put the uniform on, because I didn't like the way I was out when I got out of the military from a medical discharge. I didn't like how that happened. It was kind of like, all right, that's it. Go see Sato. You're done. Check box. And I was like, really? You know, that's all you got for me? She said, yeah, you need the directions over to Sato to find your ticket. I said, no, I was a pretty good land nav guy. I could figure that out. But at any rate, you know, my whole purpose in what I do is all about passion for the people that put the uniform on and change the whole way in the scope of how I was treated when I got out. So that way my brothers and sisters, who now we have a lot of tools, right? So that way they wouldn't have to encounter that dead stare that I had with that civilian person on the other end of the table, you know, which I completely still, you know, get shocked about that. But anyway, we started our program about 2 years ago, and actually I see a lot of my colleagues in here. We modeled it after Northrop Grumman's program, really, we did. And Karen's there, and I tell you, I did a lot of data mining and a lot of data gathering to try to figure out, you know, what were they really doing well and where could they use a little improvement. And I just adapted some models, you know, from my military background and said, you know what, here's what we're going to do, slightly different from what Northrop Grumman does, but pretty much stay the course, because if you're doing something, you're doing it right. There's no wrong in this game. But I can guarantee you one thing, you do nothing, nothing's going to happen. You know, zero effort, zero results, you made your metrics, right? 100%. So anyway, we have a orientation within SRA that we go through. Everybody has their orientation. We do orientation every Monday. For our wounded warriors, it's a little different when it comes down to simulation. First of all, I'm in constant contact with them. And when they start on that first day at SRA at orientation, I'm there in their face, meeting them. I'm meeting with the hiring manager. This is all a part of the onboarding, okay? I want to talk to that hiring manager specifically about their next 30, 60, 90 days of what they're going to be doing in front of that wounded warrior. So we have that transparency right there. I want to know what that wounded warrior is expected to do, what that wounded warrior is expected of that hiring manager. And we get that conversation right there at the orientation. And then from there, the orientation extends about 3 days instead of 1. And that goes over, you know, just basic things. There's no formation at 1300, you know, you don't, you know, you just leave, go get lunch and come back, right? You know, there's no 1630 formation, none of that stuff. But basically how to, you know, do their time card a little bit more, because they never done this before, most of them. So, you know, we just kind of take a little extra step. We do some etiquette stuff that we've incorporated, you know, like writing emails and whatnot. You know, we got like a little etiquette group thing that we do that's right on our skill port. So it teaches you, you know, this etiquette about writing emails, you know, so everybody understands what you're saying. You know, you don't do that who a man thanks, you know, who a back and all that other stuff in corporate America. So we try to get all that stuff out the way up front. So that's the orientation extension that we do at SRA. Another thing is, you know, like I said, the new hire assimilation. That's very important because, okay, you got your, you know, you hired a wounded warrior. You got this great IT person that has, you know, this certified ethical hacker certification, and you're like, yes, you know, we got to get this guy in. So you got him in. So how you keep him? You know, it's all part of onboarding. How do you present your organization to the point where you're not just selling your organization, but you're selling careers to these individuals? and you give them real expectations. And that's kind of what I do when I do my assimilation. I let them know, look, I'm going to talk to you first week. I'm going to call your boss. You know, we're going to talk about how you're doing, how you're moving along in the process. But more importantly, one thing that we do is we assign a buddy. We got an employee resource group, veteran employee resource group within our organization. It's pretty extensive. And it's a non-formal mentorship thing. You know, it's not like we're going, okay, well, we got to, you know, metrics out training for our veteran. No, we don't have to do that. I mean, that's ridiculous. You just want to put them in a comfortable environment that they're familiar with. So I'm not the only person talking to them, you know, 25, 35 times. And then if they got issues, they're coming to me for everything. Hey, I got another 100, 300 vets to worry about. So I put them in touch with a buddy. It's a buddy system. You know, we all come in military and MEPS. We get a buddy, right? That's just how it works. So from the Veteran Employee Resource Group, I do a match and mirror thing. So if I got an officer in the Marine Corps and I got an officer in the Marine that was an officer in the Marine Corps that works at SRA in our group, I try to match that up. Enlisted, that whole thing. Senior enlisted. You know, I try to make sure that the match and mirror works because they have the same conversation. And the person within our Veteran Employee Resource Group already has been an SRA employee. He knows that we got performance development meetings and performance development plans and targets and goals and things like that we have to put in our plans. Well, you know, if you've never done that, assimilated into that realm, you don't know. I mean, you got NCOICs we had to do, right? We know that kind of thing. Officers have their thing, and you know exactly what you got to do to get promoted. I mean, there's no gray area in that. You know exactly from the day you go to the board, this is what you got to answer, this is what you do, this is how you get promoted. You go to this school, you get automatic E5, you know, things like that. There's no clear picture in corporate America. And you have to somehow explain that to the wounded warrior, that there's, or veterans, period. It ain't just a wounded warrior. You guys, hey, there ain't no clear picture here. You know, you have to know, you know, if you continue to improve on your skills and use the tools that are given to you, you can actually grow a career. And that's how you retain. And that's the thing. It's not just bringing them in the door, it's keeping them. Okay, so moving forward, that's how we do our assimilation with the buddy system. They call them, hey, if anything, and this is outside of work. So if I'm working inside of Billy's my boss, and I'm working right here in this building, Stan's not my buddy. My buddy's somewhere else on another program. That's another thing. Because I don't want Stan to feel like he's obligated to Billy. So that's important. Okay, that's another thing, a part of the onboarding. Lastly is the mentorship. It's a mentorship. It's, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee. Let's talk about how you've been doing. You know, let Stan's going to call Billy and say, hey, is there anything I need to talk to, Odell about? You know, is he doing everything he's supposed to be doing? What can he be doing more? Where do you see? This is like a 30, 60, 90, 120, and you got to set some sort of measurement, right? So at the end of 90 days or end of the first evaluation, so we do our evaluations, every 6 months, and then we have a year in review. So what I try to do is, we had somebody start 2 weeks ago, a wounded warrior start 2 weeks ago. Well, our evaluation, we had end of year. That's not like really enough time. We're having it now. So until the next performance evaluation, that's when that mentor will stick with that person to make sure they fill it out right and see how everything goes. So moving forward, they can ensure if there's any gaps that need to be filled, then we can address them immediately. And if there's any training that needs to be addressed within that performance development plan, and that's another, it's a whole series of things that you do for onboarding veterans. When you come down to job descriptions, write your job description in a 30, 60, 90-day performance evaluation. I mean, you'll really change the scope of people you get in. Really, it helps. But pretty much that's how we do it at SRA from an onboarding standpoint. Any questions? Yes, sir, in the back.
Do you have a metric for retention?
Yes, we keep a metric. And one thing metric, everybody's data-driven here, right? Okay? We all got to report, right? That's what we do. Let me tell you something about metrics. Numbers miss individuals. And that's one thing I've sold to my organization. How many numbers do we got? How many hires we got? I tell you what, I can tell you how many people left. I can tell you how many people still here. Because when you start dealing with metrics and start getting into the fact that you got all these numbers you want to hire of veterans, then guess what? Your turnover attrition goes really high because you missed the individual. And that's why onboarding is so key. But yeah, we do metrics. So you got to measure that. Every year I got metrics I got to report to. But
that's why we're doing the veterans retention study at VA now. Same
you got to do that. You know, you got to say now.
I'm not challenging.
No. I was glad you brought that up because.
I'm not even looking for the whole numbers that you have, but I'm trying to show the quality that your program adds to retention.
Oh, a lot of our guys now, out of the 30 wounded warriors that we've hired over the last 2 years, we've only had 3 of those people leave SRA after like 8 months. And they went to work for the federal government, which they all came to me and said, I'm thinking, I got this federal government job at the customer. They want to hire us to do. As long as you stay employed and move forward in your career, I don't care if you work for SRA for 20 years or you work for us for, I just want to be able to transition them enough to get their career started. Hopefully they stay at us. We got people who have been since, the 2 years that the program has been there that have really grown in our organization, But at the same time, I do measure that because with the wounded warrior count, you're not going to have this enormous amount of numbers that you need to track. I mean, there's going to be a small group in the wounded warrior community. And Karen, they've at Northrop, how long, Karen? 8 years, 10 years you guys been doing
8
it?
years.
How many? You can count right now. She can give you an answer.
125.
Out of that, that's a lot, but that's small when you break down the number of years compared to, percentage-wise. And you can track, you can measure retention from that over those 8 years and those 120 people. It's real easy to do. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, did I answer your question, sir? Okay.
How long is your mentorship program, and do you maintain it throughout the entire wounded warrior program?
Yes, I mean, like I said, my only expectation is for that mentor to stay with that wounded warrior up until an evaluation period. So that could be a 6-month period, that could be, but they generally form a bond, and that's the whole thing. They build a relationship. And then they become the next mentor because now they've been indoctrinated into the SRE culture, right? So now I use them to say, hey, I got some more, after they've been at the company for, after their evaluation period, know how to do it. I got an individual that started with us, and I actually hired Michael. I've actually known Michael for over a year, but we just hired him this year. He's already in management, and he sits right there with the customer, and now he's a mentor for me, And he was a guy that put his resignation in a number of times, I'm like, Mike, what are you doing? He was like, well, I don't quite see this. And he's the guy that you had, you have to tell him, Mike, this is business, man. It's not personal, but it's not military either. Okay, man, it took him a while, but he came around and, he's doing his thing, and I can't say enough about that individual. Did that? Yes. It's usually just up to the evaluation period. So if you got an evaluation period that runs, most people do it, twice a year. Some people do it every quarter. That's ridiculous. But if you, if you do it every twice a year, once a year, stay with that individual at least until their evaluation. So that way you can, if they, are consistently an individual contributor or whatever, how they rate that stuff, you can talk to them about how to exceed that as already being on the other side. And most of the people in our and this is something that's historically funny. Most of the veterans, we got 25% veteran representation in SRA. Most of our veteran people that's in our organization that's in our ERG group, usually, on a scale of 1 to 5, 3 is like the acceptable level to get. That's like, okay, you're good, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But most of our guys get 4s. And that's something to say about veteran presence, right? Who? You always got to be different. I always got to have that one person, I'm just saying. Did that help?
Yes.
Yes, Ken.
I'd like to add to what he said. What we found is that the mentoring for the veteran population, and especially the wounded warriors, is a huge factor in their success in your organization. You know, we kind of did an unofficial survey of our wounded warriors, and those who had mentors, some of them were people we helped connect them with, and others were people they found on their own. They've gotten promoted 2 or 3 times, and they're really they're in a good place. The ones that haven't connected are the ones that are struggling to still find their path, because like, you know, Odell said, in the military, you know what your path is to get from, you know, a private to a staff sergeant or whatever, not so much in the private sector. So it's really important to the mentoring piece, which is a good thing they're doing.
I had something to add too, but sir, your question?
Hi, Odell. Mike Banks with the Maryland National Guard. How are you, how SRA validating or certifying or classify a wounded warrior?
Classified as in?
I mean, someone comes to you and claims wounded warrior status.
There's a process. There's an entry process. There's a process to get into the program. It's a volunteer program. It's self-disclosed. I got release forms. Like I said, this goes into a whole, you know, process that I developed from the Northrop Grumman OI program. And they do the same thing. Yes, you got to be at least 30% physical or a combination of 50%.
Yeah,
So.
But you were talking about basically the definition of a wounded warrior.
Combat.
Is it any different than?
It's got to be combat. You know, somebody who, you know, was at the mess hall, man, and just happened to be running back, and man, they hit their knee on the ground and fell, and all of a sudden the VA give them service connected. Dude don't qualify for my program.
Unless he was overseas fighting war.
Unless he was in combat conflict. Now, like I said, you know, I was in 5 different theaters that wasn't all reported. The ones that you mentioned, you could read about them, but the one in Columbia was a theater that was not disclosed of what we did. That was in combat. I earned 2 CIBs from the other theaters. I mean, the government regulates who gets the CIB and when they, you know, what theaters classify as CIB validated, right? But now you got this combat action badge that they, you know. I mean, so there's a lot of different, and me being, you know, being there, being one myself at 80%, I you know, it's easy for me to identify who's, you know, what's going on out there. And that, you know, helps. But yeah, there's a process. You got to be 30% physical or, you know, 50% combination. And I don't go digging. They don't tell me what's going on. I'm transparent. I'll tell people in a minute what's going on with me. That's instant credibility, right? But at the same time, they talk to my nurse and tell them, because that's all a HIPAA thing. And then from that end, you know, I get to go ahead from the nurse and say, hey, we don't, you know, there's nothing special we need. We can go ahead and move forward. And I start my activities with that individual. Does that answer your question, sir? In the back, Denise? Hey, Denise.
Odell.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you experienced, you know, I think there's a difference between a wounded warrior and a disabled veteran. And sometimes I've seen an influx of individuals with service-connected disabilities that are using the term wounded warrior when, you know, we have an individual with a combat-connected disability. In my opinion, that is the definition of a wounded warrior. Have you seen that, and how do you kind of handle that if you're presented with someone that has a VA rating of, say, 30% for pseudopolycolitis barbae,
Right.
and they say that they're a wounded warrior? How do you kind of handle that?
I actually, you know, I break it in common terms. And this is how I do it, because just because, I mean, I was a combat MOS. So it's easy for me, you know, I was 11 Bravo all day, you know. So that's easy for, you know, the 0311s all day. That's a no-brainer. But when you get that, you know, 96 Bravo, what do they call it now, 96, that Intel guy, right? Because I had to reclassify to 96, but I never worked in it. But it's an Intel. But anyway, if somebody, and this is how I differentiate, Denise, and this might help you guys from a wounded warrior status. If you went downrange one way and you came back another way, that's combat related all day long. You know, if you deploy perfectly healthy, could sleep all day, you sleep regular hours, and you come back and something ain't right, and the VA connects you to that, you fit that category. Doesn't have to be, you know, I talked to an individual in the Air Force who, you know, she's a wounded warrior. She had, you know, Air Force, I'm like, okay, there's only like a couple groups of people in the Air Force that could be combat related. But no, this individual was, you know, ran up on, and she had to make some things happen, throw some lead down range, and hey, you know, some things happened, and she came back different. She's a wounded warrior, you know, and she fits the criteria. So, you know, the scenario I use is always if you went downrange, and I'm very transparent, I say if you went downrange in a theater and you came back different than when you left, and you get connected to a certain disability rating, then you can fit into the program under a combat-related disability. Does that help? We good? Yes, sir, Stan.
I just want to bring out, there are also a number of veterans coming out too, who are coming out of the military, who may not identify themselves because they don't want to, and that's okay. We should at the same time identify that they are veterans and create a mentorship for veterans. A lot of times they're lost in that system. The transition from military where they tell me what to do to a civilian sector where nobody seems to know how to direct me. And so while I think Wounded Warrior is great, I also think we need to think in terms of the veterans who are coming back. Reserve and National Guard is a good example. When people come back, they don't know what they went through, and that's okay, but they need to have someone they can talk to who may have gone through a similar experience. So that's the concept that I think we need to bring forth. It's, yes, Wounded Warriors, I agree, but at the same time, there are veterans who are coming back who may not identify themselves as Wounded Warriors, but at the same time need to connect with another veteran, especially if something hits them. And all of a sudden this reminds me of some, well, I don't care, I never went over that, I don't care. But somebody else who went through that experience may care. So I was also 11 Bravo, so I understand how that occurs.
And to Stan's point, I'm gonna take care of any person who put the uniform on. I'm just specific to how we do it with Wounded Warriors, okay? But yeah, all veterans get the same, you know, level of commitment from me and our organization if they use the channel, if they come through this channel. I go to events and people say, well, you know, I seen stuff at SRA, I didn't apply, I didn't hear anything. I said, well, you know, now you know somebody, right? Yes, ma'am.
I think that one of the greatest disservices that each of us could do working with this group is not educating them. If they're coming to you and say, I'm a Wounded Warrior, if you don't dig just a little bit deeper, and I know a lot of us are kind of overburdened because of the economy and the lack of jobs and the extreme, the fierce competition, if we're not explaining to them, you know, hey, you're 60% service connected, but you're a disabled veteran. And even with myself and some of my colleagues with Schedule A hiring, there's still that moniker, I'm a Wounded Warrior. So it takes us to educate them, and then, you know, they become the barracks lawyers and they go tell their friends. And that's how the word spreads. But when we just kind of don't take the extra 30 seconds to explain what they are or what the ramifications are of their disability or their service connection, we do the whole community a disservice.
You're right, 100%. I mean, I agree 100%. I mean, you know, when people say, they tell me, they say, well, I'm 30% or, because I mean, the literature's right there on how you qualify. So it's not, you know, hidden. And I say, okay, I'll send you release forms. I never questioned what they did or none of that. I send them release forms, they look at it, and they look at the eligibility criteria to get in the program. They say, well, you know, I don't see anything that's listed here. And I give them examples. Did you come down? Did you come back different than when you left, right? Yeah, okay. You know, I don't question. I take, you know, SRA is built on honesty and service, so I don't go out there and try to filter everybody out, right? And especially people that put the uniform on. I'm going to help anybody that puts the uniform on. It's just that, you know, through the Wounded Warrior program, everybody wants to hire the most severely disabled people that served in combat. So we took it upon ourselves to start a program that, you know, addresses that community and their spouses. And that's really key, because if that person can't work, then we got to take care of those spouse, and we've done that too. They become part of the program. And, you know, our program expanded this year out to reach out to the spouse community to, you know, just, you know, I do all military outreach. Wounded Warrior is just a component of that. And one thing I want to mention, I know that Billy had said something to me, before I forget this, about small business, people that are small businesses here. How do you do all this? Right? How do you do all this with limited resources? It's real easy. You got the VA. The VA would be your health advocate. They would be your, you know, their mentor. You got to tie into it. They got an e-mentorship program that I learned about at an event in Fort Belvoir that is for all mentorship. They do it online. I mean, so there is resources. The VA is the biggest resource for veterans if you really, you know, take the time to connect with the right individuals. You know, and the fact that, you know, I'm in a lot of the VA programs with my ailments, you know, it helps to know a couple people too. But that's your resource as a small business, somebody who can't afford a health advocacy group, a nurse to do a screening, somebody who can't, you know, say, well, we don't have enough veterans to have an employee resource group to have a mentor. The VA got 1-800, they got, I mean, they will be the resource, but you have to tap it. They're there, you got to tap it. And they don't always reach out to us because, you know, they put the stuff out there, man. We have to go out to them sometimes. You know, it's a two-way street. You know, they're going to work for us, but we got to work for them too. They want to hire just as many vets as we want to hire just as many vets too. I just want to make sure that I address that small business person out there.